Heartbreaking news has emerged about Fox News host Bret Baier, and viewers across the nation are struggling to process it. For years, Bret has been one of the most trusted faces in American journalism, calm, steady, and composed even during the most turbulent political moments. People tune in every night not just for the headlines, but for his unmatched clarity and professionalism. Yet behind the polished broadcast desk and confident delivery, Bret has been facing something far heavier than the public ever imagined. This latest development has left his colleagues shaken, his viewers stunned, and his family deeply affected. Those who have followed his journey know that Bret is no stranger to hardship, his son's medical struggles, and the emotional weight of balancing work with family. Challenges have already tested him in unimaginable ways, but what has now surfaced goes beyond anything the public has seen from him before. In the past several weeks, small signs began appearing during broadcasts: subtle pauses, a visible heaviness in his eyes, and a tone that suggested something deeply personal was unfolding behind the scenes. At first, fans assumed it was exhaustion or stress from the relentless news cycle, but insiders have now revealed that the situation is far more serious and deeply heartbreaking. This is a reality Bret never expected to face at this stage of his life and career. The news has left even those closest to him struggling to find the right words, trying to support a man who has spent decades keeping his own struggles private, while helping millions stay informed. What happened to Bret Baier, and how is he coping with this devastating moment? The truth is more emotional and more shocking than viewers ever imagined. In recent days, heartbreaking reports have surfaced revealing the deeply personal struggle Bret Baier has been quietly facing, one that has shaken the Fox News host's world in ways few could have ever anticipated. While millions see him as the confident, composed figure who delivers the nation's biggest headlines every evening, those close to him explain that Bret has been carrying an emotional burden far heavier than the public ever realized. His calm exterior, polished delivery, and trademark professionalism hid the truth remarkably well, but privately, a life-altering situation had begun to unfold behind the scenes. People who have worked with Bret for years immediately sensed something was different. He has always been known for his steady presence, even under intense pressure, but recently, there were subtle changes. He arrived at the studio quieter than usual, spent longer periods alone in his office, and often appeared lost in thought before going on air. Producers noticed that he would reread his scripts multiple times, as if trying to refocus his mind. What nobody knew then was that he was grappling with a situation that had left him emotionally drained and struggling to maintain the composed image he had upheld for decades. Friends and colleagues describe how Bret tried to keep everything inside, determined to avoid letting personal pain spill into his work. His commitment to professionalism has always been his defining trait, and he refused to let viewers see anything other than the strong, steady anchor they relied on every night. But the situation weighing on him grew heavier with each passing week, making it harder to separate his public role from the private heartbreak happening in his life. The emotional collapse began at home, where the reality of what he was facing grew unavoidable. Late nights turned into sleepless ones, with Bret trying to stay strong for his family while quietly navigating the shock that had enveloped them. Those close to the family revealed that the news he received struck unexpectedly, leaving him devastated and uncertain about what the future might look like. Even his closest friends, who had seen him handle some of life's toughest challenges, said they had never seen him this shaken. For someone who has always been the steady centerpiece of Fox News's primetime coverage, the emotional toll was overwhelming. Work became more difficult, and moments that once came naturally, reading breaking stories, interviewing high-profile guests, keeping conversations sharp and focused, suddenly felt heavier. Bret found himself pausing where he normally wouldn't, searching for the right words, the right tone, the right stability. It was clear he was pushing himself harder than ever, determined to fulfill his responsibilities despite the pain quietly consuming him. Yet even as the weight of the situation threatened to overwhelm him, Bret remained committed to his family above all else. Those who know him best say his strength comes from the people he loves: his wife, his sons, and the tight-knit circle of friends who have stood by him through every challenge, including his son's medical battles years prior. This latest heartbreak, however, was unlike anything they had faced before. The uncertainty, the fear, and the emotional shock made it difficult for the Baier family to find stability in their daily lives. Still, Bret's resilience began to show through small but meaningful moments. Even when his voice carried a hint of strain or his expression revealed a touch of sadness, he continued to fulfill his duties with a level of commitment that left his colleagues both inspired and concerned. The story unfolding behind the scenes was more devastating than the public knew, but it was also shaping a powerful chapter in Bret Baier's life, one defined by strength, vulnerability, and the determination to keep moving forward despite unimaginable emotional pain. In Bret Baier's long career, he has reported from war zones, political battlegrounds, and natural disasters, yet nothing could have prepared him for the life-altering moment that struck without warning. It didn't happen on live television, and it didn't happen in Washington's tense political atmosphere. Instead, it unfolded during a routine family moment, the kind of peaceful pause everyone assumes will remain uninterrupted. But for Bret, that quiet moment suddenly became the beginning of a heartbreaking chapter he never imagined would hit so close to home. For years, viewers saw him as the calm, authoritative anchor who could make sense of chaos. Whether covering election night drama or breaking global news, Bret carried a steady demeanor that became his signature. But behind that composure was a father who lived with a constant threat of worrisome he rarely spoke about publicly. The world knew he had faced challenges with his family before, but they didn't know how difficult the road had quietly become. The turning point happened when Bret noticed something troubling: exhaustion, stress, and overwhelming pressure beginning to take a toll in ways he could no longer hide. Friends said he had been pushing himself harder than ever, balancing long hours at the studio with responsibilities at home. But Bret brushed off their concerns, convinced that he could handle everything, just like he always had. Then, during what was supposed to be a simple family outing, Bret suddenly felt a wave of dizziness strong enough to stop him in his tracks. At first, he tried to ignore it. Reporters are trained to power through discomfort, but within minutes, the symptoms escalated. His vision blurred, his heartbeat raced, and the color drained from his face. His family immediately rushed to help, and the outing turned into an emergency none of them were prepared for. When Bret arrived at the hospital, doctors didn't waste time. They knew what they were seeing wasn't normal fatigue. Tests were ordered immediately, and Bret's family waited anxiously, hoping the situation wasn't as serious as it appeared. But the longer the doctors kept him for evaluation, the clearer it became that this was far more alarming than anyone expected. What Bret didn't realize was that the years of non-stop stress, late-night work, breaking news pressure, and emotional strain had built up silently. Doctors told him something he feared hearing: his health was beginning to show signs of significant decline, and if he didn't slow down, the consequences could become irreversible. For a man who built his entire career on dependability, the diagnosis hit like a storm. Bret had spent decades reporting other people's crises. Now he was living through one of his own. It wasn't just a wake-up call, it was a warning. He would need to make immediate changes to protect his well-being, and those changes would affect everything: his career, his daily routine, and the way he approached life. The network was notified, and while they kept the details private out of respect for Bret, the internal reaction was one of shock. His colleagues had always known him as the strongest figure in the newsroom, someone who could shoulder any amount of pressure. To learn that he had been quietly struggling was heartbreaking for everyone who worked beside him. Viewers also noticed something was wrong. Bret appeared less frequently on air, and when he did, his usual energy seemed dimmed. Loyal fans sent messages of support, sensing that something serious was happening behind the scenes even before any official statement was released. As Bret remained under medical supervision, he was forced to confront a reality he had avoided for too long. He wasn't invincible, and that realization was perhaps the most painful part of all. For the first time in his career, he had to put himself before the newsroom, before the broadcasts, and before the pressure of breaking stories. The heartbreaking news that Bret Baier was facing a major health crisis spread quietly, but powerfully, and while the specifics remained guarded, one thing became certain: his life would never return to the pace it once had. For Bret and everyone who cared for him, this was only the beginning of a long, emotional journey. As Bret Baier focused on recovery, the reality of what his doctors told him began to sink in deeply. He had spent his entire adult life in newsrooms, fast-paced, deadline-driven, high-pressure environments that demanded constant attention. But now, for the first time, Bret was being told he might have to step away from the one thing that defined him, his work. And the uncertainty surrounding his future at Fox News was more frightening than anything he had faced in front of a camera. When Bret's medical team explained the seriousness of his condition, they didn't sugarcoat anything. They warned him that continuing with his current workload could cause permanent damage. It wasn't just about fatigue anymore, it was about long-term health, stability, and the ability to live a normal life. His role on television didn't only require physical stamina. It demanded mental sharpness, calm under pressure, and the ability to pivot instantly when news broke. Bret's declining health put all of that at risk. At first, Bret resisted the idea of stepping back. His dedication to journalism ran deep. He had reported from war zones, traveled across continents, and covered some of the most historic moments of the last 2 decades. To imagine his career slowing down felt almost like losing a part of himself. But his wife and children saw what he could not. The stress was overwhelming him, and pushing forward could have dangerous consequences. While Bret was away from the studio, the network scrambled to rearrange schedules. Temporary anchors filled in, and producers quietly wondered how long Bret might be absent. Though Fox News kept every detail confidential, whispers began circulating behind closed doors about the possibility of a long-term shift. No one wanted to think about a primetime lineup without Bret Baier. He had become the backbone of their flagship news program. But the silence surrounding his condition only deepened the concern. As days turned into weeks, Bret wrestled with the emotional toll. For years, he had prided himself on being reliable no matter the circumstances. He had covered national crises, political chaos, and international tragedy, yet the idea of being unable to fulfill his own nightly broadcast felt like the most personal crisis of all. Even hearing his show's theme music on television triggered a wave of sadness, reminding him of the life he had worked so hard to build. Meanwhile, viewers began to ask questions. Social media buzzed with speculation, and longtime fans expressed genuine worry. They weren't used to seeing Bret absent for so long. Fox News issued a short, careful statement saying he was taking time to address a personal matter. But the vague wording only fueled more speculation. Some feared he was stepping away permanently. Others worried the news was far more serious than the network was letting on. Behind closed doors, Bret met with Fox executives over video calls, discussing what the future might look like. Doctors insisted he needed more time. Executives assured him they would support whatever decision he made. But the truth was, the network was preparing for all possibilities, including the heartbreaking one that Bret might not return to his nightly role. For Bret, the emotional conflict was overwhelming. On one hand, he knew he needed to listen to his doctors and protect his health. On the other, he couldn't shake the fear that stepping away even temporarily could mean losing everything he had built. He had worked tirelessly to become one of the most trusted voices in American journalism. Letting go, even for a moment, felt like surrender. Family became his anchor. His wife reminded him that a career could be rebuilt, but a life could not. His children begged him not to push himself back into work too soon. Slowly, Bret realized that this wasn't about weakness, it was about survival. It was about choosing the future over the pressure of the present. Bret understood something he had spent years avoiding. If he didn't protect his health now, he might never return to the career he loved. The thought was devastating, but it also brought a strange sense of clarity. Whether he liked it or not, his career was officially in jeopardy. As Bret Baier entered the most uncertain period of his life, he knew one thing for sure: nothing would ever be the same again. The pressure he once carried so easily now felt heavier than ever. Yet, somewhere in the middle of the fear, confusion, and emotional turmoil, a new realization began to form. If his life was going to move forward, it had to move forward with purpose, and that meant choosing courage over fear. The turning point came one quiet morning when Bret sat alone in his living room. replaying old clips of his broadcasts. He watched himself interviewing presidents, reporting from disaster zones, and guiding viewers through some of the most chaotic moments in recent history. For the first time, instead of feeling proud, he felt tears swell in his eyes. The man on the screen looked confident and unshaken, but the man sitting in that room felt fragile, unsure, and deeply human. It was then Bret finally accepted what his doctors had been trying to tell him. Life had demanded a pause, and accepting that was not weakness, it was wisdom. Support flooded in from unexpected places. Friends, colleagues, and even rivals from across the media landscape sent messages wishing him strength. Longtime viewers emailed heartfelt notes, sharing how Bret's calm voice had guided them through difficult times. Some opened up about their own health battles, urging him to put himself first. For a man used to keeping his emotions guarded, the outpouring of compassion felt overwhelming, but it also reminded him that he had never truly been alone. As the weeks passed, Bret made the brave decision to prioritize recovery fully. He committed to a strict medical plan, attended every appointment, and finally allowed himself to rest without guilt. For years, he had powered through exhaustion, stress, and emotional burdens. Now, he finally gave himself permission to breathe. Slowly, the fog began to lift. His energy returned. The heaviness that had shadowed him started to fade. It wasn't a quick transformation, but it was a hopeful one. During this period, Bret also rediscovered the joy of simply being present with his family. He helped his son with schoolwork, cooked meals with his wife, and spent long evenings sitting outside, enjoying quiet moments he had spent years rushing past. Each small moment reminded him that life outside the newsroom was just as meaningful, maybe even more so. These experiences grounded him, giving him the clarity he needed to rebuild his path forward. Eventually, the time came for Bret to decide his future at Fox News. Executives scheduled a private meeting, allowing him the space to speak openly about what he wanted. Surprisingly, the fear that had once consumed him began to soften. Instead of worrying about losing his career, he found himself focusing on what truly mattered: his health, his peace, and his family's well-being. In that meeting, Bret chose honesty. He explained that he loved his job deeply, but could no longer work at the pace he once did. The network responded with compassion, offering him a reduced schedule and the flexibility to prioritize his health without sacrificing his role entirely. It wasn't the career he once had, but it was a sustainable future, and for the first time, Bret felt hopeful. When Bret eventually returned to television, viewers immediately noticed the difference. His presence was calmer, more grounded, and more emotionally open than before. He didn't reveal every detail of his struggle, but he didn't need to. His resilience was visible in every word he spoke, and audiences embraced him with overwhelming support. Grateful that he had chosen strength over silence. Moving forward, Bret Baier understands that life will always come with unexpected challenges, but he now sees them as opportunities to grow rather than reasons to break. His journey through heartbreak taught him a powerful lesson. Even the strongest voices sometimes need to step back, breathe, and rebuild. And doing so is not a sign of failure, it's a sign of courage.